Welcome, I'm Steve Danyew with Polyphonic, and we're very pleased to have James Feddeck with us today. James is in town conducting the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra this weekend, and this is one in a series of interviews that we're doing this season with the RPO guest conductors, and we're really excited to be doing that. So, James, welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, your background is pretty diverse in terms of your training and your musical talents. At what point did you decide that conducting was something that you wanted to pursue in addition to being a performer?
Well, for me, it was actually a very gradual realization. I had several majors in school. I was a oboe major, an organ major, piano major, and then I became also a conducting major. At the end of that, I did not finish the piano degree at Oberlin because I think probably I would still be in school by now if I were trying to do all of that. But for me, it was never a question of would I do music. It was what about music would I do? And that was a realization that didn't come to me until actually very much later. After I had started a conservatory, while I was in school at Oberlin, it suddenly dawned on me that I'd have to probably decide. So conducting was a very natural way to take my many loves and my many interests, and also my real passion as well for working with people. And I remember my first real attempt at conducting. I mean, I had taken the conducting classes and so on that most schools have, but my first real attempt at that was I put together a small orchestra. We had about 25 or 30 people, and we performed the Wagner Siegfried Idyll at Oberlin as sort of an extra ad hoc kind of performance. And I had a wonderful time. I had no idea if my friends I had bribed into playing for me had a wonderful time or not. But when we were finished, immediately they said to me, well, what do you want to do next? And so actually, I was very, very blessed to have the experience at Oberlin because I had 70, 80 people always willing to play for me, friends of mine and fellow classmates and so forth. And I was able to conduct a lot of the significant repertoire that way. So perhaps one could say conducting found me through this process of discovery. But certainly the element of people is so important to me, and what it means as a conductor to bring the musicians together for a common purpose and a common vision, but even beyond that, not only that, but the audience as well.
Great. Now, I know you just finished up a tenure as assistant conductor at the Cleveland Orchestra and also the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra.
That's right.
And I'm sure some of our viewers are curious how your approach varies between those two really different groups, and maybe as an extension of that, how you see youth orchestras as a part of music education in the U.S.
In a way, my 4-year tenure in Cleveland, not only as a member of the conducting staff of the Cleveland Orchestra, but also then as music director of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, brought along the way many various surprises and realizations. And one of them for me really was that it wasn't very different. Working with the Cleveland Orchestra, or any professional orchestra for that matter, and working with a student ensemble, at the heart of it isn't really all that distinct. Actually, the conductor has to make whatever he's given, take it and make it better. And so whether that's the Cleveland Orchestra or whether that's the students in the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, the task still remains the same. Of course, as one would expect, by virtue of the rehearsal period, I mean, the youth orchestra, we would have probably a month and a half or so to prepare the program, maybe a little more depending on where the concerts fell, because rehearsals were once a week, as opposed to the Cleveland Orchestra, or any professional orchestra really, where you'd have 4 rehearsals in the week of, and then you go. So obviously the scope and the learning curve, if you will, I mean, of a student orchestra is more gradual. than, say, a professional orchestra where you have the first rehearsal, and then immediately from the first rehearsal to the second rehearsal, there's this enormous development as you both get to know each other and what the expectation is for the various interpretations. In terms of the youth orchestras in the United States, I think that really, in many ways, shows a positive view of what classical music is in this country. Because, I mean, so often we hear about now, these days, professional orchestras struggling financially, and who's on strike, and who is having this crisis one after another. But then if you look at sort of the next level below that, if you look at what's bubbling under that surface, you have, like here at Eastman, I mean, how many students every year graduate from Eastman? And that's just one school, and one really fine institution of many incredible institutions in the country. And so you have all these very, and I think even, you know, when I go and conduct in places and I see the younger generation winning the jobs that are open, or when I go, for example, to the Aspen Music Festival and conduct there, where it's predominantly a student or fellowship type orchestra, the level of playing is so extraordinary now that's coming out of the schools of music. And even in Cleveland, when I was music director of the youth orchestra there, even just these predominantly high school students, the level is so extraordinarily high that that has to be such a positive reinforcement and a positive indication. Now, in terms of the youth orchestra, not every one of those students are going to go on in music. And also, I think probably the reality is most of the people graduating from a School of Music program may actually, some may go into the profession, some may decide they want to do something else just by virtue of life unfolding. But one thing remains certain. These are the lifelong advocates of music. And this is something that I think isn't stressed enough. That it isn't just about, for a symphony orchestra, professional symphony orchestra, in a way justifying its existence as much as it may need to do that. It isn't just about the audience coming in, but it also has to be about making music. That those who make music, whether that's in a youth orchestra, as part of a college program, a summer program, or even a chorus. I mean, there's so many of these amazing volunteer choruses in each musical community. Those who make music have a relationship to it that can't be found in any other way. So I think, to get back to the question, I think youth orchestras in the country and all aspects that encourage people to make music are so very important to the future of the art, but even more so actually show a certain health to the art that I think is often overshadowed by some of these other matters that we hear about in our time.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a great thought. Yeah. You mentioned the audience, and so obviously they're an important component of this musical world that we live in. And last night and Saturday night, you're performing the Bach Magnificat, a really substantial work that is being sung in a foreign language. And with the audience being part of this equation, how important is it to you to somehow, translate to them what this piece is about, the meaning of it, and how do you do that?
Well, music is always about meaning, and that's true whether you're hearing something like the Bach Magnificat, which we have this week, or if you're hearing a Brahms symphony. The difference, of course, is that a work that has text is pretty undeniably about a certain subject matter. And that's both very helpful, but it can also be maybe a little off-putting for some people because it's about something very specific. And one might say, well, if I don't identify with that, then this piece of music must not be for me. Whereas if you had something like a Brahms symphony where there is no text, no real clear subject matter, one might be inclined to think that this is more universal. In actuality, I think the text, or a piece of music that offers a text, it's just another window into some deeper meaning, and it's another vehicle for that, besides just the simple musical elements of the performance. This was actually something that I had mentioned in the pre-concert conversation we had last night with myself and Bill Weinert, who really did a marvelous job preparing the chorus this week. What if someone is not necessarily a particularly religious person, you know, and this is the Song of Mary, talking about the conception of Jesus in her, and the fact that God incarnate is going to come into the world and redeem the world, and Mary will be known for all generations after this. What if someone, if that's not an immediate draw for someone? Well, the music itself and the text beyond that has a certain, in my view, a certain universal appeal nonetheless. I mean, it's a very, very hopeful and joyful text. And you look at how Bach sets this text, and there's such joy in it, and there's such an uplifting spirit about it. Not to mention the fact that I mean, in the Bible there's not very many times that this is something actually that Bill Weinert had mentioned, and I thought this is really interesting. I hadn't quite considered it that way. There aren't many times in the Bible when a woman has an opportunity to say something and it's recorded like this. And for Mary, this has recorded her complete joy, and also then as well probably a little bit of the overwhelming feelings of that. These qualities I think are of universal significance for anybody. And I hope that in these performances we can make the case for that, because I think all anybody really needs to do today is open up a newspaper or put on the evening news, and it's not so pleasant. So to be able to come and enjoy, able to come to the concert and enjoy something of the arts, something that will uplift, I think that's of universal appeal, really.
Yeah, great. Well, one final question for you. For the young musicians that are watching, what would you say to them in terms of starting their careers? And you're, you know, a pretty young guy. You've really built up a great reputation and a great career so far. What would you say to them as they try to embark on their own musical journeys?
I think the main point, I would say, is don't be discouraged. It's very, very easy, I think, as a young person, well, perhaps anybody, regardless of age, today, to be discouraged, particularly in our art form, kind of reading about things not going so well with this orchestra or that orchestra and so on. There is a bright future ahead for us, because that's what we will make it to be. And it comes down to really, I think, two things on a personal level. One is always be prepared, because there are always going to be a lot of surprises along the way. I think especially now more than ever. I mean, if you look at orchestral musicians, what orchestras are being asked to do today is far broader of a scope and far deeper into other areas perhaps than they were asked to do several decades ago. So I think it really comes down to the preparation of the self, so that one can be as flexible and nuanced navigating this path as much as possible. But in the end, really to not be discouraged, because it is great music, and look at how long it's lasted so far. So why would it be going anywhere anytime soon? At least that's my thought.
That's great, yeah. Well, James Feddeck, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And best of luck in your second concert, and hope you enjoy your time in Rochester.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.